The cameras caught everything. As they crowned her America's newest billionaire, her husband stood, pulled a teenage boy beside him, and smiled. "He's my son. He deserves
Ladies
half."
and gentlemen, I would like to
Gasps filled
introduce
the
you
ballroom.
to my son,
She didn't argue.
Tobias.
She simply turned toward the front row, where one unexpected guest was already on his feet. Let us begin where the pain begins. The ballroom shined like a diamond pressed into the heart of the city. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling. Gold cloth covered every table. 300 of the most powerful black faces in the country sat shoulder to shoulder, sipping from tall glasses, laughing the careful laughter of people who measured every word. This was the night the magazine would name the richest self-made woman in the nation. This was the night her name would echo across the world. Outside, photographers pressed against the doors. Inside, every seat was full of people who had spent their lives building things, companies, careers, reputations, and every one of them had come to honor one woman. They did not know, as they raised their glasses, that they were about to witness something none of them would ever forget. That is the thing about the brightest nights. They cast the darkest shadows. Her name was Adeza Bell. Most people simply called her Ada. She sat at the center table in a deep blue gown that fell over her like quiet water. She did not laugh loudly. She did not lean across the table to be seen. She watched. She always watched. That was her way, even when she was a girl with nothing but thread and dreams. And beside her sat the man she had given 15 years of her life. Marcus Bell wore a tailored black suit that she had paid for. He had a wide smile and warm eyes, the kind of face that made strangers trust him in seconds. People liked Marcus. Marcus made sure Marcus liked Marcus. It was the only thing he had ever been truly good at. Watch closely now, because what looks like love at this table is already rotting underneath. The host stepped to the stage. The lights dimmed. A hush rolled across the room like a wave. "Tonight," the host said, "we honor a woman who built something out of nothing. A woman whose company now stands among the largest private empires this country has ever seen." The screen behind the stage lit up with one number, a number so large it did not feel real. $85 billion. To put that in plain terms, it was more than the yearly earnings of entire cities. It was the kind of fortune that did not fit inside a single human mind. The room rose to its feet, applause thundered, and Ada simply breathed. But then Marcus stood too, and he did not clap. He reached down to the table behind him and pulled a boy up by the arm. A boy of maybe 15, thin, frightened, dressed in a suit that did not fit him. The boy's eyes darted around the room, lost. The applause stumbled, then it died. "Before my wife accepts this honor, there's something this family needs to say out loud." Ada's hand froze around her glass. "This is Tobias," Marcus said, gripping the boy's shoulder. "My son, my blood. For 15 years, I kept him a secret to protect this family, but I won't hide him anymore." He turned and looked directly at his wife. "He's mine, and he deserves half of everything we built. Half of all of this." Did you hear that? We built, as if he had ever built anything but lies. A woman at the head table nodded slowly. That was Marcus's mother, Della. She wore pearls Ada had bought her, and a look of cold satisfaction. She knew. She had always known. And near the back, at a small side table, a woman in red lifted her glass an inch and smiled into it. Her name was Renata. We will come to her. Oh, we will come to her. 3 betrayals in one breath. A husband, a mother-in-law, a stranger in red. All of them watching Ada, waiting for her to break. The whole room turned to look at her. 300 faces, a dozen cameras. Everyone waiting for tears. Everyone waiting for the proud billionaire to crack open in public. Think of how cruel that moment was meant to be. They had chosen the brightest night of her life to break her. They had chosen the one room where she could not slip away, not hide, not even let her face fall without a camera catching it. Marcus had planned that way. Renata had planned that way. They wanted her cornered, wanted her shamed, wanted the whole world to watch a woman they decided was nothing finally crumble. But Ada did not cry. She did not shout. She set her glass down softly, the way a woman sets down something she no longer needs. And then she did something no one expected. She turned, slowly, away from her husband, away from the boy, toward the front row, where a tall man in a gray suit was already rising to his feet, a leather folder in his hand. Who was he? Why was he standing? And why did Ada look at him not with fear, but with something that almost looked like relief? Remember that man. Everything turns on him. A quiet woman is not an empty woman. But to understand this night, we have to go back, 15 years back, to a girl with cracked hands and a single brass spool of thread. Long before the gowns and the cameras, there was a narrow tailoring stall at the corner of a loud, dusty market street. The stall belonged to Ada's father. He was a tall, gentle man with a slow voice and steady hands, and he sewed clothes for working people who could not afford much. He did not have wealth, but he had something rarer. He had a name people trusted. Ada grew up under that stall's tin roof, listening to the hum of the sewing machine and the chatter of customers. She learned to thread a needle before she learned to write her name. She learned that a single strong thread could hold a whole garment together if you knew how to pull it tight. One evening, when she was a girl of 12, her father placed something in her palm. It was a small brass spool of thread on a thin chain, worn smooth, old. Every empire starts with one strong thread, he told her. You remember that. She did not understand it then. She kept it anyway, on a chain around her neck, hidden under her collar. She would keep it for the rest of her life. Now look at this child and tell me you see a billionaire. You don't. Neither did anyone else. That was the whole point. When her father passed, the stall closed. Ada was barely a grown woman with no money and no plan. She took the only thing she truly owned, his knowledge of cloth, and she made a choice that everyone around her called foolish. She started selling fabric online, just scraps at first, leftover rolls, factory offcuts, bundles other people threw away. She bought them cheap, photographed them carefully, and sold them to small tailors and home seamstresses across the country. She began with $40. That was all she had. $40. Less than the cost of a single nice dinner in the city where she now sat being crowned a billionaire. Hold that picture in your mind. $40 and two hands that knew thread. She worked through the nights. She answered every message herself. She wrapped every package by hand, the brass spool swinging at her collar as she bent over the kitchen table. And slowly, fabric by fabric, order by order, the little account grew. Picture those early days. A single room, a borrowed laptop with a cracked corner, a young woman eating cold rice between orders because she would not spend on herself what she could spend on more stock. She had no investors. She had no inheritance. She had no rich uncle waiting in the wings. She had her father's eye for cloth and a stubbornness that frightened even her. She learned which fabrics held color and which faded. She learned which seamstresses came back and which never did. She wrote down every lesson in a small notebook, the way her father had taught her to measure twice before cutting once. And when a roll of fabric arrived damaged, she did not throw it away. She found the good in it, cut around the flaw, and sold what was whole. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was ever wasted. That, you see, was the secret no one ever noticed. Ada did not get rich by luck. She got rich by refusing to throw away what others called worthless. One day, That same gift would let her look at a thrown-away boy and see something worth saving. But we are not there yet. It was around that time she met Marcus. He was charming back then too, a young real estate man with big talk and empty pockets. He drove a borrowed car and wore borrowed confidence, and he could make a room feel warm just by walking into it. He saw a hard-working woman with a small online shop, and he thought he saw something easy. A quiet wife who would cook and clean and stay small while he chased his dreams. A woman who would never outshine him. He courted her with words, because words were the only thing he ever truly owned. He told her she was beautiful when her eyes were red from working late. He told her he believed in her in the soft hours when belief was all she had. And Ada, who had lost her father and was alone in the world, let herself lean on that warmth. Can you blame her? A heart that has been alone too long will believe almost anything that sounds like home. He married her believing she would stay in the shadows forever. He married the wrong woman. A quiet woman is not an empty woman. What Marcus never understood, what he never bothered to learn, was that Ada had a mind that never stopped moving. While he slept, she studied. She learned about supply chains. She learned about factories and shipping and contracts. She learned which mills were closing and bought their stock for pennies. She built relationships with manufacturers across 3 continents, all from a laptop at her kitchen table. The small fabric account became a wholesale business. The wholesale business became a supply company. The supply company began clothing brands you would recognize, names on labels in stores all over the world, all quietly sourced through the network one woman had stitched together, thread by thread. She never put her face on any of it. She let the work speak. She let the numbers grow in the dark. Marcus saw none of this. He saw a wife who was often tired and often busy, and he assumed she was struggling at some little hobby. He never asked. A man who is busy admiring himself rarely looks closely at the woman beside him, and by the time the numbers grew too large to ignore, the gap between them had become a canyon. And she did something careful, something that would matter more than anyone could guess on this night 15 years later. She built it all under a holding company, not under her married name, not under anything that touched Marcus. Every share, every asset, every signature, hers alone. Not out of suspicion at first, just out of the habit of a woman who had learned young that you guard the thread that holds everything together. Keep that detail close. He forgot she ever sewed. He forgot where she came from, and that forgetting will cost him everything. The years passed, and the small fabric account became something Marcus could not ignore. But here's the strange and ugly truth of men like him. He did not grow proud of his wife. He grew afraid of her. At first, the money was a trickle. Then it was a stream. Then one year, Ada quietly paid off their house, and the next year she bought the building Marcus rented his little office in, and Marcus began to feel something cold crawl up his spine. The men he drank with started asking questions. "Your wife's company, man, how big is that thing really?" And Marcus, who had built his whole life on being the one people admired, could not answer. He didn't know how big it was. She never bragged, never threw numbers in his face, and that silence aided him. A better man would have been proud, but Marcus had spent his whole life being the bright one in the room, and now the room was looking past him at his wife. The love, if it had ever been love, curdled into something sour. He was a small man standing beside a great thing, and he felt himself shrinking every day. So, when Renata walked into Marcus's office 2 years before the gala, she found exactly what she had been hunting for. Because make no mistake, Renata did not stumble into Marcus. She chose him. She had spent months studying Ada from a careful distance, the quiet empire, the untouchable fortune, the husband trailing behind it like a shadow that resented the light. She knew she could never get near the woman,
But the man was a door left unlocked, and Renata had built a whole life out of walking through unlocked doors. Renata was sharp, beautiful in a hard, polished way. She worked in finance, and she could read a balance sheet like other people read faces. She did not love Marcus, let's be honest about that from the start. She loved what stood behind him, a fortune so large that even a sliver of it would change her life forever, and she had already done the math on exactly how to get it.
She had spent years watching rich men and learning their weaknesses. Marcus, she saw in a single evening, had the oldest weakness of all. He needed to feel important. He needed someone to tell him he was a great man trapped in a small story. So that is exactly what she became. Not his lover, but his mirror, showing him the giant he wished he was. She did not rush him. That was the frightening thing about Renata. She was patient the way a hunter is patient. She let Marcus complain. She refilled his glass, and slowly, week by week, she began to plant a single idea in his head so gently that he came to believe he had thought of it himself. "You built that woman up," she whispered, "and she's left you with nothing. Doesn't a man deserve his share?" It was a lie. Marcus had built nothing, but a lie is sweetest to the man who is starving for it. He drank it down like cool water and asked for more. And Renata, watching him swallow it, already knew every step of what would come next. She had planned it the way a general plans a war, months in advance, from a map only she could see. And here is where it turns dark. Renata did not simply learn Marcus's oldest secret, she went looking for it. She pulled old records. She traced payments Marcus had made quietly for years to an account he never spoke of. And what she found made her smile in the dark. A child. A son named Tobias, born before the marriage to a woman who had long since vanished. A boy Marcus had quietly paid to keep at a distance and out of sight. Marcus had spent 15 years burying that boy. Renata dug him up in 3 weeks. Think about that boy for a moment. 15 years old, raised in the corners of other people's lives, knowing he had a father somewhere who sent money but never warmth. A child who had done nothing wrong, who had asked for nothing, who only wanted what every child wants, to be claimed, to be wanted, to belong. And these adults looked at that hunger and saw not a child to love, but a lever to pull. Renata's eyes lit up when she saw it, because in that buried boy, she saw the key to a locked empire. A blood heir, she told Marcus, laying it out like a blueprint. A son. If that boy has a claim, then so do you. No court ignores a child. She leaned close, her voice low and certain. We don't ask her for anything. Asking gives her the power to refuse. We make it impossible for her to say no. In public, in front of every camera in the country, where saying no makes her the villain, not us. You just have to stand up and speak. I'll handle the rest. Remember those words. Renata always handled the rest. That was the whole trouble with her. Do you see the trap now? They would use an innocent boy as a crowbar to pry open an empire. They would dress greed up as fatherhood and force Ada to either hand over half or look like a heartless woman who would reject a child on camera. It was cruel. It was clever. And Marcus, drowning in his own smallness, said yes. And Renata directed every second of it. She chose the words, she chose the moment, she chose the exact way Marcus would pull the boy to his feet, coaching him like a director shaping an actor. Don't ask her, tell her. Tell the whole room, make it about the child. No one can argue against a child. She made him rehearse his lines until they sounded like his own. She was not just part of the plan, she was the plan. Marcus was only the mouth she spoke it through. They chose the gala, her night, the night the cameras would be brightest and the crowd would be largest, the night she could not walk away.
And Della, the mother-in-law, gave her blessing to the whole rotten plan. She had never thought Ada was good enough for her son. "Let her share," she sniffed. "She has too much anyway. It isn't natural for a woman to have all that." 3 of them, bound together by greed, wearing the mask of family. But they had all made the same mistake, every single one of them. They believed Ada's silence meant she did not see. She saw everything. The truth is, Ada had known about the affair for almost a year. She found out the way real life works, not the way movies pretend. No dramatic phone in the wrong pocket. A document, a simple piece of mail, a property inquiry sent to the house by mistake. Marcus and Renata's names side by side on a request to view apartments in another city. A future being built without her, leaking out through one careless envelope. She sat with that envelope at her kitchen table for a long time, the same table where she had built an empire, and something inside her went very, very quiet. I want you to understand what that quiet was. It was not peace. It was the silence of a woman whose heart is breaking so completely that there is no sound left to make. For weeks, she barely slept. She moved through her enormous house like a ghost, running a global company by day and crying behind locked doors by night. The man she had loved when they both had nothing had traded her in, not for love, for money she had earned with her own 2 hands. She thought of all the small things, the way the betrayed always do. The anniversary he had forgotten and she had forgiven. The way he had stopped looking at her across the table years ago. The nights he came home late smelling of someone else's perfume, and she had told herself she was imagining it because believing the lie was easier than facing the truth. How many women have done the same? How many have folded the warning signs into a drawer and shut it just to keep the peace one more day? She grew numb. The brass spool felt cold against her chest. There were nights she wondered if her father had been wrong. Maybe one strong thread was not enough. Maybe everything frays in the end. Have you ever been betrayed that you forgot who you were? That was Ada in those long gray weeks. But then she learned the rest. Through quiet means, a loyal assistant, a careless word from Della, a paper trail Renata thought was hidden, Ada slowly uncovered the whole plan, the secret son, the public ambush, the scheme to corner her on her own stage and force her hand in front of the world. And something shifted in her. The numbness cracked, and underneath it was not weakness, it was steel. She did not scream. She did not confront. That was never her way. Instead, late one night, she picked up the phone and made a single call to the one man she trusted completely, the man who helped her build the holding company brick by brick, the man who knew where every share and every signature truly lived. For weeks, she had been a woman breaking. In that single moment, she became a woman deciding. There is a world of difference between the two, and the people who had ambushed her would never understand it until it was far too late. They had misunderstood her grief for surrender. They did not know that a quiet person pushed past the edge of patience does not explode. She prepares. "They're going to make a move," she told him softly, "at the gala. I need you there, in the front row, with everything." "Everything?" he asked.
"Everything," she said. Then she hung up, and she touched the brass spool at her throat, and for the first time in weeks, she breathed all the way down. A quiet woman is not an empty woman. Let them pull their thread. She would show them what holds the whole garment together. What happened at that gala, no one in that room saw coming. So now we return to the ballroom, to the frozen applause, to the boy standing lost beside a smiling Marcus, to the woman in red sipping her wine, to 300 faces waiting for Ada to fall apart, and to the tall man in the gray suit, rising from the front row with a leather folder in his hand. Half of everything we built, Marcus had said. He was still standing, still gripping the boy's shoulder, basking in the shock of the room. He thought the silence was fear. He thought he had won. Ada rose from her chair, smooth, unhurried. She smoothed her blue gown and stepped up onto the stage, into the brightest light in the room, and took the microphone gently from the frozen host. Every eye followed her. The woman they had come to watch crumble was walking toward the light instead of away from it. There is a kind of power that does not shout, that does not rush, that simply arrives and fills a room without asking permission. That was Ada now. Each step was steady, each breath was even, and the silence that had been meant to drown her had become the silence of 300 people leaning in to hear what she would say. "Marcus," she said. Her voice was calm, almost kind. "Thank you for being honest in front of all these people. Now let me be honest too." She looked out at the crowd. The cameras drank her in. "My husband says we built this together." She let the words settle. "So let me tell you what we built. I built a company from $40 and my father's sewing table. Marcus built a story where he was the hero of my life." A pause. "Only one of those things is real." A ripple moved through the room. "He says this child deserves half." She turned and looked at Tobias, really looked at him, and her hard face softened for just a moment. "This child deserves many things. He deserves the truth. He deserves better than being used as a weapon by grown men and women who should know shame." She let her eyes move slowly across the room, across the 300 faces that had come to watch her break. "You all expected me to cry tonight," she said. "You expected me to beg, or to rage, or to fall apart. I understand why. People have been expecting me to fall apart my whole life. The quiet ones always confuse them. They cannot tell the difference between a woman who has nothing to say and a woman who is simply waiting for the right moment to say it." Then she lifted her eyes to the man in gray. "Would you come up, please?" The man climbed the steps and opened his leather folder. He spoke in a clear, even voice that carried to every corner. "My name is Ada Bell's attorney and trustee of record," he said. "I've represented her business interests for 11 years. So let me clear up a confusion in this room. There is no we in this empire. There never was." He turned a page. "Every share of this company is held by a private trust. The sole owner is Ada Bell, not jointly, not as part of any marriage. Hers and hers alone, from the first dollar to the last. Mr. Bell has no stake in it. He never has. There is nothing for any heir to inherit from him because he owns precisely nothing." The color drained from Marcus's face. You could watch it happen in real time on every screen in the room. The smile that had ruled that ballroom an hour ago slid off his face and did not come back. "Perhaps you are wondering how this is possible," the attorney went on, calm as still water. "It is possible because 15 years ago, Mr. Bell signed an agreement before his wedding. He believed his bride would never amount to much. He treated the document as a joke. He did not read it. He simply signed away any future claim, laughing, certain it would never matter. That matters now." He turned a final page. "As for this evening," the attorney continued calmly, "the venue, the catering, the awards, the cameras, all of it was paid for personally by Ada Bell, including," and here he glanced at the woman in red, "the seat at table 9. Mr. Bell did not even pay for the chair he humiliated his wife from." A sound went through the crowd, not a gasp this time, something lower, the sound of 300 people understanding at once. But the attorney was not finished, and what he said next stopped even Ada's enemies cold. "One more matter," he said, turning a final page nobody knew was still there. 6 months ago, this company acquired a struggling investment firm as part of a routine expansion. A small firm, deeply in debt, bought quietly for its client list. He lifted his eyes and looked directly at the woman in red. "The firm where Miss Renata is employed. The firm that signs her paychecks." The room went utterly silent. "For the past 6 months," he said, "the woman who came here tonight to take Mrs. Bell's fortune has, without knowing it, been working for Mrs. Bell. Every salary, every bonus, every dollar she was paid while she plotted in the dark, paid by the very woman she was plotting against." Renata's face went white as paper. She had spent 2 years hunting an empire, and the whole time the empire had quietly owned the ground beneath her feet. She had never been the hunter. She had been walking through a door that Ada had left unlocked on purpose. Do you understand what Ada had done? She knew. She knew who Renata was, knew where she worked, and instead of firing her, instead of exposing her early, she had let the trap close and made sure that when it snapped, it would snap on the ones who set it. The mistress who thought she was pulling every string had been dancing on strings of her own the whole time. That right there is the difference between loud people and quiet ones. The loud ones plan a night. The quiet ones plan a whole board and simply wait for the loud ones to move first. Marcus's mouth opened and closed. That can't. We're married. Half is. You already answered that question yourself, years ago with your own signature. You called it a formality. You laughed about it. She kept the copy. Watch the room now. Watch how fast the air changes. And watch the woman in red. Because Renata, the one who had planned every step, who had chosen every word, who was so certain she held the winning hand, understood before anyone else in that room exactly what had just happened. Her sharp finance mind ran the numbers in an instant, and every one of them came back 0. She had spent 2 years building a trap around a fortune that was never inside the cage. She had aimed a masterpiece of manipulation at the one door that had no lock because it had no handle. There was nothing to steal. There had never been anything to steal. For the first time in the whole story, the mastermind's face broke. She set her wine down very carefully, the way a gambler sets down a losing hand, and reached for her purse. Renata had come for a fortune. She had just learned there was no fortune to come for. Not for Marcus. Not ever. Not for her. And Della, the proud mother in her borrowed pearls, sat very still, realizing that the family she thought she was protecting had just destroyed itself on live cameras. Ada took the microphone back. She did not gloat. That was the most devastating part of all. She simply looked tired and clear and free. "I won't punish a child for the sins of his father," she said. "Tobias, none of this is your fault. You'll be cared for. I'll see to it myself, properly, with no strings and no cameras." The boy stared at her, tears in his eyes, the only honest face in the whole sorry scene. Then she turned to Marcus one last time. "You've spent 15 years sure that I was small," she said softly. "You should have asked yourself one question. If she's so small, why does everything have her name on it?" She set the microphone down, and she walked off that stage with her head high, the brass spool resting quiet against her heart. Now let us speak of what fell and how fast it fell. By morning, the video was everywhere. Not the video Marcus had imagined, him as the bold father claiming his son. The other video. the one where a calm woman in blue dismantled 3 liars without raising her voice. It spread the way truth spreads when people are hungry for it. Millions watched a woman they had never met stand alone in a room built to break her and walk out unbroken. They shared it with their daughters. They shared it with their mothers. They wrote beneath it the stories of every time they too had been underestimated by someone who should have known better. A single night in a single ballroom became somehow everyone's night. The world did not see a villain who refused a child. The world saw a queen who had been ambushed on her own stage and answered with nothing but the truth. They loved her for it. Marcus lost everything because everything had never been his. The building his office sat in, hers. She did not even have to evict him. She simply let the lease run out and declined to renew it. The house he had bragged about, hers, held in the trust, and he was asked through lawyers to leave. The business partners who had shaken his hand because of his powerful wife stopped returning his calls. A man whose whole worth was borrowed found out what happens when the loan is recalled. He tried in the weeks after to tell his side. He went to the few friends he had left and explained that it was all a misunderstanding, that his wife had twisted things, that he was the real victim. But the video had already spoken louder than he ever could. People had seen his face on that stage. They had seen him pull a frightened boy into the light to use as a tool. There is no speech in the world that can undo a thing the whole country has already watched with its own eyes. He moved into a small rented room on the far side of the city, the kind of room he had lived in before he met Ada, before her quiet work lifted him into a life he never earned. The wheel had turned all the way around and set him down exactly where it found him. Some nights, they say, he would scroll through the old photographs on his phone and not recognize the man smiling in them. And Renata, the mistress who had engineered the whole ruin, fell the hardest of all, because she had the furthest to fall. By the morning, the story was not just about a husband and a secret son. It was about the beautiful woman in red who had spent 2 years building a trap and had been quietly owned by her own target the entire time. Her name spread through every finance office in the city. She had built her career on being the smartest person in the room, the one who saw 3 moves ahead. Now she was the woman who had been outplayed so completely that she paid for the privilege. No firm would touch her. No wealthy man would let her near his accounts. The one thing she had truly owned, her reputation as untouchable, was gone. She did not even wait for the dust to settle before running. Within a week, she was gone from Marcus's life. No goodbye, no apology. Already scrambling for the next city where no one knew her face. She had come to take everything. She left with less than she arrived with, and she left Marcus exactly the way she found him. Empty. Only now he knew it, and worse, he knew who made it so. Della came to Ada once months later, pearls gone, pride gone, asking quietly if there was any place for her. Ada listened. Ada was not cruel, but she remembered the cold nod at the head table, the satisfaction on that face while her heart was being torn apart in public. "You're welcome to forgiveness," Ada told her gently, "but you are not welcome to my life. Those are 2 different things." And that was all. No screaming, no revenge, just doors quietly closed. Do you see how she won? She never threw a punch. She never had to. She simply let the truth stand in the light, and the truth did all the falling for her. There was one person Ada did not abandon: the boy. She set up a private trust for Tobias, a real one, protected, that no greedy adult could touch until he was grown. School, a safe home, a future. The only innocent in the whole affair became the only one she chose to lift, because Ada knew what it was to be a child holding nothing but someone else's hope. She went to see him herself, once, in the quiet weeks after. No cameras, no lawyers, just a woman and a frightened boy in a plain room. She did not lecture him. She did not make him thank her. She simply told him the truth he had never heard from a single adult in his life. "None of what happened was your fault," she said. "You were a child in a room full of grown people who should have known better. That ends now. You're going to be all right." And the boy who had been used as a weapon against her wept in front of the only person in that whole story who had ever shown him mercy. A quiet woman is not an empty woman. Months later, on a soft gray morning, Ada stood in a small workshop on a quiet street. It was not a grand place. It was a narrow room with good light, a few sewing machines and bolts of beautiful fabric stacked along the walls. She had opened it herself, with her own hands, the way her father once opened his stall. Here she taught young women with cracked hands and big dreams how to thread a needle, how to pull one strong thread tight, how to build something out of almost nothing. The girls who came to her were the ones the world had already counted out: single mothers, girls who had dropped out of school to feed younger siblings, women who had been told in 100 small ways that they would never be anything. Ada looked at each of them and saw a younger version of herself bent over a kitchen table with almost nothing and a cracked laptop. She did not give them money. She gave them something better. She gave them a skill and the belief that their own 2 hands were enough. The billion-dollar empire still ran, of course, smooth and vast, far away in glass towers. But this was where she came to remember who she was. The towers were what she owned. This little room was who she was. She never confused the two. That, perhaps, was the whole secret of her strength. A young apprentice asked her once, shy and curious, "Miss Ada, is it true, all those things they say about you? The empire, the cameras, the husband?" Ada smiled. She reached up and unclasped the chain from around her neck and let the small brass spool roll into her palm. "What's true," she said, "is that everything I have started with one thread. And a thread doesn't care how rich you are or how poor you are. It only holds if you pull it honest." She pressed the worn brass spool into the girl's hand and closed her fingers around it. So hear the lesson, you who have been underestimated, silenced, thrown away. The loud ones will always think the quiet ones are weak. They will mistake your patience for permission. But dignity outlasts noise. Truth outlasts lies. And the most expensive mistake a loud man can make is believing a quiet woman has nothing inside her. Ada turned back to the window. Outside, the city moved on, loud and bright and hungry. Inside, the light fell soft across the fabric, and her hand turned the brass spool slowly in the morning sun, the way her father had taught her all those years ago. One strong thread, pulled honest, holding everything together. If this story moved you, then this next part is for you. If you have ever been counted out by people who thought you were nothing, comment one word: thread. Let me know you were here and that you heard her. Subscribe and turn on the bell because there are more stories like Ada's coming, stories of quiet people who were underestimated and rose anyway. Your story isn't over either. Pull your thread honest, and I'll see you in the next one.